You know that feeling when you finally sit down to relax, and instead of peace, you get this gnawing sensation in your chest? Like you should be doing something, anything, instead of just being still? Yeah, that's not laziness. That's guilt. And it's destroying your ability, actually, to rest. But here's what nobody tells you. That guilt is trying to communicate something much deeper than you think. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you rested without your phone in your hand? Without the TV on? Without scrolling? Without distracting yourself? Without doing something to justify the fact that you're sitting down? Can't remember? You're not alone. Most people can't. Because we've been conditioned to believe that rest needs to be earned, that it needs to be productive, that it needs to come with an asterisk. But let's back up. Where does this guilt even come from? Why do we feel bad about doing something that's literally necessary for survival? You don't feel guilty about breathing. You don't feel guilty about blinking. So why rest? Well, the answer is more complicated than you might think, and it goes way deeper than just having too much to do. First off, let's talk about how we were raised. For most of us, our relationship with rest was shaped long before we even knew what burnout was. Think back to your childhood. What messages did you receive about productivity? About being busy? What makes someone valuable? Maybe you had parents who worked constantly and praised you for doing the same. Maybe you grew up hearing things like idle hands or the devil's workshop, or you can sleep when you're dead, or there's always something that needs to be done. These weren't just throwaway comments. They became the operating system of your mind. And here's the thing. Those beliefs don't just disappear when you become an adult. They burrow deep into your subconscious and start running the show. Every time you sit down to rest, that old programming kicks in. It whispers that you're wasting time, that you're falling behind, that everyone else is out there hustling while you're sitting on your couch like a slacker. That voice is so automatic, so familiar, that you don't even question it anymore. You just believe it. But let's get real for a second. That voice isn't actually yours. It's a collection of other people's fears and values that you internalized before you were old enough to choose your own. Your parents, your teachers, your coaches, society at large. They all had their own anxieties about productivity and worth, and they passed them down to you like a family heirloom you never asked for. Now add to that the culture we live in today. We exist in a world that glorifies the grind. Everywhere you look, someone is bragging about their side hustle, their morning routine that starts at 4 a.m., their ability to function on 5 hours of sleep. We've turned exhaustion into a status symbol. Being busy isn't just normal anymore. It's a badge of honor. It's how we prove we matter. Social media makes this 10 times worse. You scroll through your feed, and everyone is doing something. They're at the gym, they're launching a business, they're traveling, they're creating, they're achieving. And what are you doing? You're lying on your couch, feeling guilty about it. The comparison is instant and brutal. You start to believe that if you're not constantly producing, constantly moving, constantly improving, then you're falling behind in some race you didn't even sign up for. But here's what that guilt is really about. It's not actually about rest. It's about worth. Somewhere along the way, you learn to equate your value as a person with your productivity. You learn that love, respect, and acceptance are things you have to earn through achievement. Rest became threatening because if you're not doing anything, then what are you worth? If you're not producing, then who are you? This is the core wound that most people don't want to look at. The guilt you feel when you rest is actually grief. It's the grief of never feeling like you're enough just as you are. It's the grief of believing that your existence needs to be justified. It's the grief of thinking that love is conditional, that it has to be earned through performance. And let's talk about what this does to your nervous system. When you're constantly in go mode, when you're always pushing, always doing, always achieving, your body is in a chronic state of stress. Your sympathetic nervous system, the one responsible for fight or flight, is stuck in the on position. And here's the kicker. When you finally try to rest, your body doesn't know how to shift gears. It's been running on adrenaline and cortisol for so long that stillness feels dangerous. So what happens? You sit down to relax, and your mind races. Your body feels restless. You get anxious. You feel guilty. And instead of recognizing this as a sign that your nervous system is dysregulated, you interpret it as proof that you shouldn't be resting. You think the anxiety means you're doing something wrong, when actually it means you're doing something your body desperately needs, but has forgotten how to do. This is why rest feels so uncomfortable for so many people. It's not because you're lazy or undisciplined. It's because your nervous system has been trained to associate productivity with safety and rest with danger. Somewhere in your subconscious, you believe that if you slow down, something bad will happen. You'll lose your job. You'll lose respect. You'll fall behind. You'll be abandoned. The guilt is actually fear in disguise. Now let's talk about the different flavors this guilt comes in, because it's not always obvious. Sometimes it shows up as restlessness. You're sitting there trying to watch a movie, but you can't focus because your brain keeps making a list of everything you should be doing instead. Sometimes it shows up as self-criticism. You call yourself lazy, undisciplined, and unmotivated. Sometimes it shows up as a comparison. You think about all the people who are out there grinding while you're wasting time. And sometimes it shows up as this weird need to make your rest productive. You can't just relax. You have to relax efficiently. So you turn rest into a task. You optimize your sleep. You schedule your downtime. You make sure your hobbies are improving you in some way. Even your rest has to serve a purpose. Even your rest has to make you better. This is the hustle culture brain on overdrive. It's so afraid of worthlessness that it can't allow you to just exist without an agenda. But here's the truth that nobody wants to hear. Real rest, the kind that actually restores you, has no purpose. It's not supposed to make you more productive. It's not supposed to improve your performance. It's not supposed to optimize anything. It's supposed to be useless. That's the whole point. Rest is the radical act of being a human being instead of a human doing. And this is where things get interesting, because when you really think about it, the guilt you feel about resting is a symptom of something much bigger. It's a symptom of disconnection. Disconnection from your body, disconnection from your needs, disconnection from your inherent value as a person. You've been so focused on what you do that you've forgotten who you are underneath all of that. Let me tell you what happens when you start to heal this. When you start to rest without guilt, something shifts. At first, it's uncomfortable, really uncomfortable, because all those feelings you've been avoiding by staying busy start to surface. The sadness, the anger, the loneliness, the fear, they all come up when you're still. And this is why so many people stay busy. Not because they have so much to do, but because they're running from themselves. But if you can sit with that discomfort, if you can let yourself feel what needs to be felt without immediately distracting yourself or jumping back into productivity, something amazing happens. You start to remember who you are. You start to reconnect with the parts of yourself that got buried under all the doing. You start to hear your own voice again, instead of just the voices of everyone who told you what you should be. And here's the paradox. When you stop trying to earn your worth through productivity, when you stop measuring your value by what you accomplish, you actually become more creative, more effective, more alive. Because you're no longer running on fear and obligation. You're operating from a place of genuine energy and interest. The things you do come from inspiration instead of desperation. But let's be practical for a second, because I know what you're thinking. This all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually do this? How do you rest without guilt when everything in your life and in your head is telling you that you shouldn't? Well, the first step is awareness. You have to start noticing the guilt when it shows up. Don't judge it. Don't try to fight it. Just observe it. Notice where you feel it in your body. Notice what thoughts come with it. Notice what you're afraid will happen if you keep resting. The second step is questioning those thoughts. When your brain says you should be doing something, ask it why. Why should you be doing something right now? What terrible thing will happen if you don't? Is that actually true, or is it just a belief you inherited? Most of the time, when you really examine these thoughts, you'll find they don't hold up to scrutiny. They're based on old fears and outdated programming, not on present reality. The third step is practice. You have to teach your nervous system that rest is safe. And you do this by resting, even when it's uncomfortable. Start small if you need to. 5 minutes of sitting without doing anything. No phone, no TV, no distractions. Just you and your breath. Notice what comes up. Notice the urge to move, to check something, to be productive. Don't act on it. Just notice it and let it be there. Over time, as you practice this, your nervous system will start to recalibrate. The anxiety will decrease. The guilt will soften. You'll start to remember what it feels like to just be, without needing to justify your existence through constant action. And this is where the real healing happens. Now, I want to address something important. Some of you might be thinking, but I actually do have a lot to do. I have responsibilities. I can't just rest whenever I want. And you're right. Life is demanding. But here's what I've noticed. The people who say they don't have time to rest are usually the ones who need it most. They're running on empty, making decisions from a place of depletion, and then wondering why everything feels so hard. Rest isn't a luxury. It's not something you do when everything else is finished. It's a necessity. It's the foundation that everything else is built on. When you're rested, you think more clearly, you make better decisions, you have more patience, and you're more creative. When you're depleted, everything takes longer, everything feels harder, and you make mistakes that create more work for yourself. So the question isn't whether you have time to rest. The question is whether you can afford not to. And I'm going to guess that the answer is no. You can't afford to keep running yourself into the ground. You can't afford to keep ignoring your body's signals. You can't afford to keep believing that your worth is dependent on your output. Here's another thing about guilt. It's often a sign that you're betraying yourself in some way. When you feel guilty about resting, what you're really feeling is the conflict between what you need and what you think you should be doing. Your body is saying slow down, but your mind is saying keep going. Your heart is saying you matter, but your conditioning is saying you have to earn it. That internal war is what creates the guilt. And as long as you keep choosing the should over the need, the guilt will persist. Because every time you override your body's wisdom in favor of external expectations, you're sending yourself a message that you don't matter, that your needs aren't important, that other people's opinions are more valuable than your own well-being. Is that really the message you want to keep reinforcing? Let's talk about what guilt is protecting you from, because guilt is always protective. It's trying to keep you safe from something. Usually, it's trying to keep you safe from judgment, from criticism, from rejection. If you rest and someone thinks you're lazy, that feels dangerous. If you rest and you fall behind, that feels threatening. So guilt steps in to motivate you back into action, to keep you safe from those perceived dangers. But here's the problem. In trying to protect you from external judgment, guilt is creating internal suffering. It's making you miserable in an attempt to make you acceptable to others. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is being acceptable to people who would judge you for having basic human needs really worth sacrificing your peace, your health, and your sanity? The answer, by the way, is no. It's never worth it. And the people who truly care about you, the people who actually see your value, they don't want you to burn yourself out to prove your worth. They want you to be healthy and happy. The judgment you're afraid of is usually coming from people who are just as trapped in the productivity trap as you are. They judge your rest because they can't allow themselves to rest. Your guilt is keeping their guilt company. What if you could start to build a different relationship with rest? What if instead of seeing it as the opposite of productivity, you saw it as the source of it? What if instead of rest being something you do when you've earned it, it became something you do to sustain yourself? What if your worth wasn't up for debate anymore, and rest was just a natural part of being alive, like eating or sleeping or breathing? This isn't about being lazy or checking out of life. It's about being intentional. It's about understanding that you are a human being with limits, with needs, with a body that requires care. It's about recognizing that the constant push to do more, be more, and achieve more is often driven by fear, not by genuine desire. It's about asking yourself what you actually want your life to feel like, not just what you want it to look like from the outside. And here's something wild. When you start to rest without guilt, when you start to honor your needs without apologizing for them, other people notice. Not because you're talking about it, but because you're different. You're calmer. You're more present. You're less reactive. You have more to give because you're not running on empty anymore. You become a living example that there's another way to exist. Some people will be inspired by that. They'll start to question their own relationship with rest and productivity. They'll start to wonder if they, too, could step off the hamster wheel. But some people will be threatened by it. Your rest will make them uncomfortable because it challenges the beliefs they're holding onto for dear life. They might criticize you, call you lazy, or accuse you of not caring. And that's when you'll really be tested. Because in those moments, you'll have to choose. Do you go back to the guilt, back to the grind, back to proving your worth through exhaustion? Or do you hold your boundary and trust that your worth isn't dependent on their approval? This is the real work. This is where the healing happens. Not in the grand gestures, but in the small daily choices to choose yourself over the conditioning. Let me tell you what I think guilt really means when it shows up around rest. I think it means you're healing. I think it means you're changing. I think it means you're starting to value yourself in a way that threatens the old systems you used to operate from. Guilt is the friction between who you're becoming and who you used to be. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's also a sign that you're moving in the right direction. Every time you rest despite the guilt, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching yourself a new truth, that you are worthy of care, that you are allowed to have needs, that you don't have to earn your right to exist. This isn't selfish. This is survival. This is what it means to reclaim your humanity in a world that wants to turn you into a machine. And I know it's hard. I know it feels vulnerable to stop doing and just be. I know it feels risky to let go of the identity you've built around being busy and productive and always on. But what's the alternative? To keep going until you break? To keep sacrificing your well-being on the altar of productivity? To keep pretending that you're fine when you're barely holding it together? You deserve more than that. You deserve to rest. You deserve to exist without having to justify it. You deserve to take up space without having to earn it. And the guilt you feel? It's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something different. Something scary. Something necessary. So here's my question for you. And I really want you to think about this. What would change in your life if you truly believed that rest wasn't something you had to earn, but something you inherently deserve? What would shift if you stopped measuring your worth by your productivity and started measuring it by your humanity? What would become possible if you permitted yourself to just be? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's your relationship with rest? Do you feel guilty when you try to relax? What do you think guilt is really trying to tell you? Let's talk about it, because I guarantee you're not alone in this struggle, and sometimes just knowing that other people get it can make all the difference. Look, at the end of the day, the guilt you feel about resting is a symptom of a world that values production over people. But you don't have to buy into that system. You can choose differently. You can decide that your worth isn't negotiable and your needs aren't optional. You can practice rest as an act of rebellion against a culture that wants you exhausted and compliant. And every time you choose rest over guilt, you're not just healing yourself. You're breaking a cycle. You're showing the people around you that there's another way. You're permitting others who are also struggling with this. You're creating a ripple effect of change that goes far beyond your own life. So rest. Rest even when it feels wrong. Rest even when your brain is screaming at you to do something. Rest even when you're afraid of what it might mean. Because on the other side of that guilt is freedom. On the other side of that fear is peace. On the other side of that conditioning is the version of you who knows, deeply and completely, that you are enough exactly as you are. Thank you so much for watching this video. If this resonated with you, if it made you think differently about your relationship with rest and guilt, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow, and it lets me know that this kind of content is valuable to you. And if you want more videos about psychology, self-awareness, and breaking free from the patterns that keep you stuck, subscribe to the channel. There's so much more we're going to explore together, and I'd love to have you along for the journey. Take care of yourself, and remember, rest is not something you earn. It's something you deserve.